They don't make seasoned musicians anymore.
right?
They're all our age.
Yeah, well, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Hot Pole Studios. I'm Adam Steele, and joining me today is Mike Robinson from Let's Talk About Reaper. How are
Good
you?
morning. I am doing lovely in freezing cold West Tennessee. How about you?
I'm doing well in freezing cold England. It's strange, it was super sunny a couple of days ago and then it snowed. Weird.
Uh, that sounds like Tennessee weather. We get all four seasons here every few hours.
Wow. Yeah, we're kind of experiencing Tennessee. I don't like it.
Wait till the tornadoes come.
Oh boy. No, I'm good for that one. But yes, the reason we're here today is that Mike has a new drum production course with ProMix Academy, and it's all in Reaper, right?
That is
So
correct.
so it's very much in both our wheelhouses because I've recorded loads of bands with full real drum kits and everything, but I come at it from the solely producer angle, and I'm not a drummer per se. I can play, but I'm not a drummer, right? But you have that perspective. So let's talk a little bit about how these two worlds collided, the kind of the drums and the Reaper thing. How far back do both of those go for you?
Gotcha. So a lot like yourself, I'm not really a drummer by nature. I'm more of a guitarist who is put in the position of having to play drums. And with regards to Reaper, I've been recording my own bands and other people's bands for a while. And the natural evolution of that is wanting to record live drums as I begin to play more and also as I come into contact with more drummers. It seems more and more commonplace these days for people to use sample replacement and also use things like Steven Slate drums, which is nothing wrong with that. But I'm a little bit old, stay off my grass, and just really wanted to work more on recording natural drums and getting them to sound as best as I possibly could in a mix.
I think it's still a completely valid approach. I do now use some samples in my production, but that's never my starting point. My starting point has always been get the drums themselves to sound the way you want them and as good as you physically can.
Right. It's kind of a weird topic too. People are really touchy about the subject. I think to me, as I think about samples and how those are sold, somebody's actually recording these drums. So
Mm,
why not? Why don't I just become the person who learns how to properly record drums? And of course, the next step for properly recording is making sure that the performance is as tight as you can get it, but at the same time, not making it robotic. I want to
yes.
preserve as much of the natural performance as I can, but just tighten up the groove a bit since most of the time you don't get the pleasure of dealing with recording a full band at the same time. It's
Yes.
usually one at a time.
It's funny that quite often the feedback I get when I do productions is, why didn't you edit the drums? And the answer is, I did edit the drums, you're just not hearing it. And it's that fine balance, isn't it? If you want to keep
Right.
the drummer, but you don't want him to sound like a complete clown. I mean,
Right. And
also, some of the drummers I've worked with are incredibly experienced, some less so. And there's a certain expectation that I find that you have to have a performance released at a certain level for it not to be a sticking point for the listener.
I would say so.
So, can you speak to how far you would reasonably go with editing? Is that something kind of that's very much a feel thing for you, or is there a
Well,
fine line that you define?
I would say that I'm definitely not one that does 100% grid alignment. I like to not record. I like to edit in large paths, or what's the word? My English is bad today. I like to edit in larger segments and move portions of the performance as opposed to chopping up every single hit and making sure that every hit is on grid because no one plays that well. I've had a few friends that are about 90% accurate, but I have yet to come across anyone who is 100% on grid every single time. And
Mm.
really, I wouldn't want it to sound like that. It just sounds unnatural. And in my opinion, a performance like that tends to suck the soul out of the music. I want to preserve as much of the original performance as possible, but just tighten it up a bit so that the next person who's tracking has something reliable to track to.
Yes. I mean, even then, like, I do know one person who can track like that, and that's Mike Mallion from Monument. But that's one whole person. Like, out of everybody that I've ever recorded, a sample size, and you get one, that is an anomaly. So you're still absolutely right. I think that, like, whenever I record myself playing, I'm the polar opposite. That I can just about hang on the click, and that's my MO when I'm playing, is don't get too flashy, stay on the beat. And even then, sometimes I rush a little or pull a little, not in the right kind of way. And it's finding that there's some perspective, isn't it, of kind of, is the drummer pushing and it's a good thing, or are they pushing and it's a mistake?
And it's strange though, because like if you listen to older music, say from the '70s and a good bit of the '80s, of course, when bands were more recording live on the floor, there was always an ebb and flow to the music. It was not perfect, but those songs also stand the test of time. So there's a lot to be said for keeping that human element.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you listen too closely to any Queen performances, you're like, ooh, boy. Uh, but as a whole, it works. But I think the difference is that those guys would have had months to record in the studio over and over and over until it was right. And those were the kind of drummers where I think that was a period where there were so many bands that were at least moderately successful that the standard was arguably higher on average, where if you weren't at that level, you didn't get to be in those bands.
Right.
It's a tricky thing. Whereas, I mean, it's a tricky argument, but I think that rock and metal are kind of a bit more niche now as a concept, especially with the dawn of the kind of home programmer, of someone who'll write everything in the house. It used to be that you would have to practice several times a week with a band just to be able to make the song full stop. But
Right.
that doesn't mean anybody's bad. It just means that because of kind of, you know, I think the ability requirement has shifted somewhat. We have to be able to play to a metronome where that never used to be a thing. But at the same time, where you didn't have to be able to play with a metronome, you had to be able to be stable on your time in a different way that some of the best drummers still are, but the requirements are so different that as a producer, I think we have to look at it from a completely different lens and just accept, okay, this is the way it is. How do I achieve a thing that feels good whilst keeping that
Right.
interesting thing that this person's come up with?
And like we said before, I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we're mostly recording separately anymore. So if the drummer comes in and tracks, it's literally impossible for a guitarist or bass player to come in after him or her and play along with that without having something steady because they
Yes.
don't know if the drummer's going to be ahead or behind.
Mm. I think the expectations changed as well because everything's digital now, everything's in a DAW like Reaper. We automatically have a grid. So we expect to use the grid. So we go
That's
in with the preconception of must be able to play to the grid, and it's a shifting. It's made everybody think differently, I think.
But also, as a drummer, it keeps you honest. It's a very good
Yeah,
gauge of your skill level. You know, you think that you're on the grid, and then you go back and listen to it and find out how far off you actually were. Definitely makes you
absolutely.
practice harder.
Mm. It's funny. I saw there was a website somewhere that had mapped out the tempo of classic songs, and you can see them just waving a little bit.
Yeah,
Whereas
like
modern stuff is
classics
just
like Back in Black, for example. Like by the time they hit the first chorus, I think it's deviated like maybe 15% from the original tempo.
wow.
But as I think about listening to it before, and I use this term loosely, before I became a producer or whatever I am, I didn't care. It's just a good song. So,
Yeah, and that still has to come first, right? It really does. But beyond that, I think there is a certain expectation from listeners now because everything is, well, the top tier stuff is so hyper polished that even the stuff that isn't at that top tier, we've got a set expectation. So we have to kind of work to that framework now.
and that's a weird one because I think that I've got a lot of pushback against that type of thing, and I understand fully that I do not have like platinum or gold records out there because of my lack of wanting to grab a hold of certain standards that are out there today for modern music. But I don't know. I guess I've just really got an old school approach to just about everything, but at the same time, I've embraced editing for drums. It's a difficult fence to ride.
Yeah, but it's. I'm guessing then that you would do what we call the kind of the modern recording technique, where you would get some sort of scratch track, get the drums in, tighten the drums, and then get the band to record to that.
Exactly. That is still how I approach just about everything. I will always get some semblance of a scratch track so that the drummer has a point of reference. So, I can map out my project in Reaper with markers and regions, and that way they've got something other than just a boring click to listen to, and hope that they remember exactly how the song goes. As you said,
Yes.
once I've got the drums tracked, I'll tighten that up and then bring the others in to do their performance.
And that's usually how I do it as well. The rare instances of doing the whole band in the room are very much for like traditional punk bands for me now. Whereas, yeah, a lot of them, the more modern bands, they want everything to be as kind of big and tight and wall of sound as possible. And that includes things like double tracking guitars, doing extra layers, and those kind of things are really hard to get tight if things weren't done with a metronome in mind. Certainly what I've found, because then if you're trying to count them in, unless again you've got really seasoned musicians, because there will be someone in the comments, I'm sure, saying, oh, well, I don't need to do this. Well, it's like, yeah, well, maybe you don't need to do this. But if you've
Well,
been
they
playing for
don't make
30
seasoned
years,
musicians anymore.
right?
They're all our age.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm on the younger end at 35, and even so,
Oh
then, like,
gosh, I'll be 46 this year. To be
Oof.
35 again.
yeah. But I'm definitely the odd one out with kind of the production kind of circles that I run in, that I was 14 when I started taking mixing seriously, and everyone else was much older. So I
think
was
I
kind of the
still don't
whiz
take it
kid.
seriously. It just it's something fun to do.
Oh man, but there was a question in one of the groups that I was in recently, which kind of goes to a lot of this, which was, how many hours do you think you need to put in to mixing before you consider yourself a good mixing engineer? And I mean, there's no good answer to that.
Oh, there
but
is. The answer is all of the hours.
Yes, a
But
lot.
self-assessment, you're always going to be your own worst critic. I mean, there's things that I've done that some people believe is amazing that I still don't like, and it's always I could do better, I could do better. As
Yeah.
the saying that a mix is never done, you've just hit a deadline.
Yes, absolutely. But it's funny that I have got to the point now where I can kind of put an edit together and a mix together in a 3-4 hour period, and then that's kind of done. And then I listen back to it a week later and go, oh, I should have changed this, this, and this. But the only reason that I do it so quickly now is that kind of, so I don't lose the momentum, lose the impetus, and everything's just focused and done, and you don't get into the weeds. Because I've definitely found once you go past the 4-hour mark, you very
You
quickly
just
hit the
lose
12-hour
track of
mark.
where you were, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you come to it the next day and you go, what did I do for those last 8 hours apart from just tweak a snare?
Gosh, I've done that so many times too, to where I'll come back and just fully reset a mix and start over and do better in like an hour or two than I did in the past 12.
Yep, I've done that so many times. But I think that speaks to experience in itself, that having the confidence to look at it and go, nope, start again, that's okay. And not go, oh, my life is ruined, but just,
No,
all
you
right,
just learn from it and improve. I mean,
yes,
you have to stay teachable for your entire career.
yes, absolutely. I mean, I still do things like I'll listen in the car on a long drive to things that I produced a couple of years ago, a few years ago, not just to be like, oh, look at how good I am, but just to pick it apart and go, how was the mix engineer in me then doing this? And
Right.
why
I'm
does it
constantly
suck?
looking at opportunities for improvement.
Yeah. So coming back full circle to what we were talking about with drum production and editing, it's something that I probably am not great with in Reaper. I don't know any particular ways of doing it that would speed up a workflow, which for me is a weird thing because that's kind of all what I'm about, is working quickly. I'm guessing there are ways and means of shifting everything easily that I wouldn't have picked up on, that are kind of just below the surface, or with
Definitely. There's some things that I talk about in the course, particularly with regards to certain actions that are provided through SWS extensions that will allow me to group the drums, and without having to, like, in Reaper, you can typically split a track by just clicking the letter S on your keyboard, or you may have something else bound to that. I use
yes,
some custom actions to switch my mouse modifiers. Basically, when you switch your mouse modifiers, it just changes the way that the mouse behaves in certain criteria. So when I've got my fast edit mode engaged, I can just click any spot on the drums, and it will automatically split across the entire group of drums and add a crossfade to the left of my cursor. In that mode, my cursor also changes to where if I'm on the lower half of a media item, it slip edits, and if I'm on the upper half, it moves the item. So with
Wow.
that mouse modifier engaged, I can quickly go through and just make cuts and slip edits without my hands having to move.
Wow. See, that's the kind of thing I need to spend some time with this course and really dive into that, because that's the kind of thing I still do it the old ways. I still split everything, grab everything, do everything. And it's a weird feeling for me, who used to be the kind of cutting edge whiz kid, to feeling like I'm the traditionalist now.
Well,
So,
and it's strange because like in the video, I do an edit of one performance over the span of, gosh, I think I probably take 3 hours on it, which is an insanely long time. But I like to narrate as I go and explain why I'm doing things.
sure.
Now, if you're really good at it, like John Tidy from Reaper Blog, for example, he does this stuff insanely fast to where if he's not distracted, can edit an entire song in like 15 minutes.
Wow.
And it's like you get to a point to where it's like looking at matrix code. You can see it and tell what's going on without listening. And that's
Yeah.
how he works, is he just clicks and moves until the song's done. Then he goes back and listens to it. I don't trust my eyes because I'm old. And so I go back and listen to things a lot while I'm in the process. So it takes me a bit longer, but it's still pretty fast. I can go through a song if I'm not interrupted in maybe 30 to 45 minutes.
Wow. I do a bit of that with vocal production. If you see me use spectral peak, so everything's different colors. But that's with one line at a time. That's not with a whole kit. That's a whole different ball game. But
True.
yeah, I mean, this is it though, isn't it? Is it's not like efficiency is everything, because it's getting yourself out of your own way. And that's why I started using Reaper in the first place, is because the other DAWs I was using, you had to go through so many steps just to do certain things, that by the time I'd got the thing done, I'd forgotten why I was doing it, or I'd lost all enthusiasm for getting this thing right, you know.
Right, and with the
And
custom actions and everything, there's so much opportunity to automate tasks that would normally take a whole lot of clicks or keyboard presses or whatever,
mm,
which that's a bit intimidating to some people because it's so customizable.
mm.
But that flexibility is also its power.
I mean, I'm going to be looking more and more into customizing Reaper soon, because this kind of thing really does elevate it. Strangely, my Reaper is almost entirely stock, and that's just me being an old man at this point and going, well, I got used to it a certain way, and like, no, I really should stretch out. So I'm definitely going to be checking out this course and going, well, that's something I should be doing. That's something I should be doing. That's a particular mic thing, but this is how I would do it. And taking away, not necessarily everything. Every course I've ever watched, I take away things that get integrated into what I do. And that's the most valuable thing to me, is not necessarily doing something exactly another person's way, but going, I didn't know that. Why didn't I know that?
Right,
How did
just
you
take it
do
and
that
make it
again?
your own. And
Right.
that's again is the beauty of Reaper, is that there is no one definitive way to do anything. You can
Mm.
take anything and customize it the way you like. I mean, the principles that I use in this course, I actually learned a few years ago from John with Reaper Blog and modified it a bit.
And it
So, like,
became your own
several
thing.
years back, I knew nothing about editing drums, was playing in a band at the time, and recorded my drummer, and I wanted to learn drum editing, so I actually hired John to edit the drums for me and film it and make me a private course to teach me how to edit drums.
Wow.
So, fast forward to 2022, and I guess I just beat him at the punch, putting out putting out a proper course for it.
Well, that talking of which, the link is down in the description, and there is actually a special bundle as well. If you are less familiar with Reaper as a whole, there is a bundle now on Pro Mix Academy that is my Ultimate Reaper course and Mike's drum production course all together.
I
For
actually
it.
bought your course despite now I don't know Reaper inside and out. I don't think anybody does, but I learned a lot from your course, even though I already know and use Reaper.
Awesome.
I'll
I'm
tell you
guessing.
one thing, what I really have learned after watching yours and after doing my own course is I got mad respect for you for the amount of effort you put into your course. It was a lot more work than I ever anticipated.
Yes, well, thanks. Yeah, people don't realize how much goes into making it presentable and clear and
I'll
and
do better
splitting it
next
all. Well, it's funny that I kind of got lucky in a way that by the time I got to doing my course, I'd already done 2 iterations of a free version on my channel, because the first version kind of sucked, but it was never
time.
meant to be a big production. But then there was a big kind of, oh, this is great. And then I'm like, yeah, but it looks like it sucks. So went back,
Gosh.
redid it, and it really blew up. And then it's like, right, let's make this the ultimate everything. And
Well,
yeah,
for me, it's barely been over a year since I started my YouTube channel, and as far as this video stuff, I'm just learning it as I go. So I'm just happy to have anything out there at this stage. This early in the game to have something out on Produce Like a Pro is insane to me. It's an incredible opportunity, to which I owe you for the warm introduction to Warren, by the way.
well, you've got a great channel, great personality, and you've got things to say. It made perfect sense.
I've got coffee.
Absolutely. And I did, but it's time to go and get another one. So on that cue, thank you everybody for tuning in. Check out Mike's course in the description below. And if you want to get the full bundle, that's there as well. Thanks, Mike, for taking the time to do this with me. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know what to do. And we'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.